happened in an instant. One breath, one heartbeat, and everything that had once been so vivid and alive disappeared into a blur of darkness. The last thing I remember was the unbearable weight pressing down on my chest, the pain shooting through my body, and the coldness of the palace floor beneath me. It wasn't supposed to end like this. I was a prince, a son of the royal family of Saudi Arabia, born into luxury, wealth, and power, a life surrounded by gold, marble, and respect. But none of it mattered now. None of it could save me from this final, inevitable moment. I was dying. The doctors had told me I was in perfect health, that I had many years left to rule, to serve my family, to uphold the legacy of the kingdom. But here I was, lying motionless on the ground of my own chambers, my mind clouded with confusion. I had everything, a royal title, power, the respect of the people, everything a man could ever want. But none of it was worth anything now. I had lived my life by the rules set for me, duty, honor, faith. But when faced with death, those rules no longer mattered. A sharp gasp, and then everything went silent. I closed my eyes, feeling my life slipping away. The world around me dimmed, and the cold air turned warmer, softer. In that instant, I felt no fear, no regret, just a profound sense of release, as if the chains that had bound me for so long were finally loosened. I was free. When I opened my eyes again, I was no longer in my chamber. The silence that had filled my world was replaced with a soft glow. It wasn't bright or blinding. It was a gentle radiance that seemed to surround me. I looked around, disoriented at first, but the landscape was unlike anything I had ever seen. It wasn't the lush palace gardens or the majestic city of Riyadh. It was something different. I stood on the edge of a vast field, the ground beneath me soft and green, stretching out as far as the eye could see. The air smelled of fresh flowers and earth, and the breeze was warm, carrying the scent of something far more beautiful than anything I had ever known. In the distance, I saw figures moving, people who walked with a sense of peace and tranquility that I had never encountered before. There was no fear, no urgency, no noise, just calm. A voice broke through my thoughts. "You are no longer in your world," the voice said. It was not a command, but a simple statement. I turned to find a figure standing beside me, an older man, dressed in robes of white, with eyes that seemed to glow with an inner light. His presence was both calming and powerful, and his face held the kind of serenity that only comes with true understanding. "Where am I?" I asked, my voice trembling. My mind was still grasping the reality of what had just happened. "You are in the afterlife," the man said, his voice gentle but firm. "You have passed beyond the veil, Prince Khaled. You are dead." The words hit me like a wave crashing over me. Dead? How could this be? Just moments ago, I was alive, ruling my kingdom, fulfilling my duties as the future of the royal family. This was impossible. This wasn't how it was supposed to end. "But I have so much left to do," I protested, my voice rising in panic. "I haven't even begun to fulfill my destiny. I am a prince. My people depend on me." The man nodded slowly. "Yes, you were a prince, but the time has come for you to understand something much greater than your title, Khaled." He extended his hand, and in that moment I realized that I had no choice but to follow him. What else was there to do? My life was over. I had no kingdom, no family, nothing but whatever lay ahead. As we walked, the world around us seemed to shift. The peaceful field gave way to something darker, more oppressive. The air grew thick, heavy with a sense of despair. The ground beneath my feet turned from soft grass to blackened stone, cracked and jagged. In the distance I saw figures, people, tied to the stone, their faces contorted in agony. Their cries echoed through the air. "What is this place?" I whispered, my heart pounding in my chest. The man's face darkened as he looked at the scene before us. "This is hell," he said softly. "The consequence of those who turn away from the light, who choose to live in selfishness and greed." I turned away, unable to look any longer. The sight was unbearable, yet I couldn't escape it. I felt my stomach twist, my breath catch in my throat. "I've spent my whole life following the rules," I pleaded. "I've followed the faith, obeyed the laws. How can this be the end?" The man's expression softened, though his eyes still held a deep sadness. "It is not your obedience that matters, Khaled. It is the heart behind it. You have lived a life bound by duty, by fear, by expectation, but you have never truly sought the truth. You have never truly understood what it means to love, to forgive, to serve with humility." The weight of his words sank into my chest. I had followed the rules, yes, but had I truly understood what they meant? Had I ever truly loved? Had I ever truly sought the truth? Or had I simply followed a path that was laid out for me, without question, without understanding? This is your choice, Khaled. You must choose the path that will lead you either to salvation or to eternal separation from the truth. You must choose what kind of life you will lead, whether in this world or beyond. Before I could respond, the scene shifted once again. The peaceful garden, the bright light, the soothing presence of the man, everything slipped away, and I was once again standing in the cold, sterile darkness. But this time, I was not alone. "Khaled," a voice called, soft but urgent, "it is not your time yet." The words came from deep within me, like a whisper in my soul. "You have a message to bring back." I gasped, struggling to breathe as the world around me began to dissolve. "A message?" I asked. The voice answered, "Yes, you have seen the truth, and now you must return. You have been given a second chance. Do not waste it." The transition from the ethereal to the tangible was so swift that it felt like a snap, a sudden jolt that left me gasping for air. I had been floating in the calm embrace of light, surrounded by peace. But now I was back to the cold, harsh reality of my own existence. I lay in the middle of my bed in the royal palace, drenched in sweat, my heart pounding in my chest. The familiar scent of rosewater and incense filled the air, but it all felt distant, as though it belonged to someone else's life. The grandeur of the palace, its towering walls, the marble floors, the flickering gold accents didn't seem to matter anymore. I could still feel the heaviness of the air around me, but it was no longer suffocating. My eyes scanned the ornate furnishings, the silk curtains, the gleaming chandeliers. I was back in the life I had known, but it felt as if I was seeing it for the first time. The truth I had seen in the afterlife, in that serene garden, seemed to haunt the corners of my vision. It was still there, lingering in my mind, pressing against the walls of my consciousness. I reached for my chest, expecting to feel the weight of the sickness, the pain that had nearly killed me. But there was nothing. The pain was gone. I was alive again, but not as I had been before. I had been granted a second chance, a rare gift, and I couldn't let it slip away. I couldn't return to the life I had known. The palace was alive with movement as I walked through its vast halls. Servants hurried about, attending to their duties, but their faces seemed to blur around me. They moved in synchronized steps, as if they were part of some grand performance, but none of them truly saw me. I had always been the prince, the son of the king, the heir to a throne, but now I felt like a shadow passing through their lives. It was as if the veil had been lifted. I saw the palace for what it truly was, a gilded cage. The people bowed to me, respected me, but no one really knew me. No one saw the turmoil I had been through, the questions I had asked, the choices I had been forced to make. My father, the king, expected me to resume my duties immediately, to take my place at his side in the royal court, but I couldn't do that anymore. I couldn't pretend to be the man I once was. "You're quiet today, Khaled," his voice carrying a weight that only a king's words could bear. He sat in his grand chair at the head of the royal table, his eyes sharp and calculating. His gaze lingered on me, assessing. "What is on your mind?" I looked up at him, the man I had admired all my life, but now the admiration felt distant, clouded by a new understanding of the world around me. I've been thinking, Father," I said, my voice sounding foreign in my own ears. "I've been thinking about the future, Father, about my place in it, about what I'm meant to do." He didn't smile, but there was a slight shift in his posture, a signal that he was listening. "You are meant to lead, Khaled," his voice replied, low and commanding. "You are the heir to the throne, Khaled. Your place is here, by my side, helping to guide this kingdom into the future." His words, once a source of pride, now felt like a chain wrapped tightly around my chest. I had always known that I was destined for this life of duty and responsibility. But now, it felt hollow. The world I had once been so sure of was fading away, and in its place was a new world, one I had never truly seen before. I looked at him, but I didn't see the man I had once admired. Instead, I saw a ruler who had built his life on power and tradition, a man who had never questioned the way things were. And in that moment, I realized that I could no longer follow this path. "Father," I said, my voice shaking with an emotion I couldn't fully explain, "I'm not sure I can live like this anymore. I can't be who you want me to be. I'm not sure I even know who I am." He stared at me, his eyes narrowing, and for the first time I saw the fear in his gaze. Fear of losing control, fear of losing his son to something beyond his understanding. "What are you saying, Khaled?" he demanded, his voice rising. I stood up, my body trembling, but my heart burning with a newfound resolve. "I'm saying that I need to find my own way. I need to understand who I truly am. I need to know the truth." There was a long silence, the weight of my words hanging heavily in the air. My father's face remained unreadable, but I could see the anger building behind his eyes. "You will not abandon your duty, Khaled," he said through clenched teeth. "I have prepared you for this your whole life. You will lead this kingdom, whether you want to or not. You have no other choice." But in that moment, I knew I did have a choice, and it wasn't the one my father had planned for me. I spent the next few days in a haze of confusion and isolation. I withdrew from my royal duties, retreating to my chambers, the walls of which seemed to close in around me. I had been given a glimpse of something greater, something beyond the life I had known. But how could I explain it? How could I even begin to tell my family what I had seen, what I had learned? I opened the Gospel of John again, the small book I had hidden away in my desk. The words seemed to speak directly to me, as though they had been written for this very moment. "In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God." The message was clear, yet impossible to comprehend. How could I reconcile this new truth with the life I had been living? How could I follow a path that would separate me from my family, my people, and my faith? But I knew one thing. I had to try. I had been given a second chance, a rare gift, and I couldn't let it slip away. I had seen the beauty of peace, of love, of forgiveness, and I knew that I could never go back to a life ruled by duty and fear. The truth I had seen in that vision was calling me forward, and I had to answer. But I also knew that this path would not be easy. The choice I had made would come with a price, and the road ahead would be full of obstacles, some I had yet to even imagine. I closed the book, my heart pounding with mixture of fear and excitement. I made my decision. There was no turning back now. The days following my decision felt like I was trapped between two worlds. The world I had once belonged to, full of royal duty and expectations, and the world I was beginning to understand, one that had nothing to do with titles or power, but everything to do with truth, love, and peace. I had chosen a path that would cost me everything I had ever known, but it was the only path I could walk now. I woke early the next morning, as I always had, to the call to prayer that echoed through the palace. But today, it sounded different. The words, the rhythm of the chant, which had once filled me with reverence, now seemed distant and hollow. I could feel the tension in my chest, the weight of my decision pressing down on me as I stood there, silent, as the imam's voice drifted through the air. For a moment, I considered praying, but it wasn't the same. I had always prayed out of duty, out of obligation, to fulfill the expectations of my family, to maintain my place in the royal line. But now the prayer felt like a mask I no longer wished to wear. Instead, I turned and walked out of the chamber, the grand corridors of the palace stretching endlessly before me. I passed servants and guards who greeted me with the same reverence as always, but it felt different now. I wasn't their prince anymore. I had become someone else. I spent the next few hours wandering the grounds of the palace, my mind racing with questions. I had been given a second chance to discover the truth. But what did that truth mean for me? What was I supposed to do with it? As I walked through the gardens, I spotted a familiar figure standing near the fountain. Ahmed, my childhood friend and servant, was watering the plants, his back turned to me. He didn't notice my approach at first, and for a moment I hesitated. Ahmed had always been there for me. He had been with me since I was a child, teaching me how to ride horses, play chess, and even how to treat others with respect. He was loyal, humble, and above all, he had always been a source of strength for me. But I knew the conversation I had to have with him would be the hardest one of all. He had always respected my place in the family, but what would he think of the decisions I had made? What would he say if I told him the truth? I cleared my throat softly, and Ahmed turned, his face lighting up with a warm smile. "Your Highness," he said, bowing slightly. "Good morning." I smiled back, but it was a hollow smile. I wasn't a prince anymore, not in the way he saw me. "Ahmed," I said quietly, the words feeling heavy on my tongue. "Please, call me Khaled." His smile faltered slightly at the change in my tone, but he nodded. "Of course, Khaled. Is something troubling you?" I took a deep breath. This wasn't easy, but it was necessary. "I need to speak with you about something important, something that changes everything." He raised an eyebrow, his eyes full of concern, but he gestured for me to sit beside him by the fountain. We both took a seat, and I could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on me. This wasn't just a conversation, this was a confession. "You've always been like a brother to me, Ahmed, and I know you've always supported me, respected my role as the prince, but things have changed. I've changed." Ahmed looked at me closely, his expression thoughtful. "I've noticed, Khaled, you've been distant lately. I didn't want to intrude on your thoughts, but I feared something was troubling you." I looked into his eyes, the eyes of a man who had known me for my entire life, a man who had seen the prince, the heir, and now was about to see something else, something more vulnerable. I've been searching for something, Ahmed, something I couldn't find in this life, in this palace. I don't know how to explain it, but I'm no longer sure of what I believe. The faith I was raised in, it doesn't feel real to me anymore. Ahmed's face softened, but I could see the hint of concern behind his eyes. He had always respected the royal family, the faith of Islam, but his heart was gentle. He wouldn't judge me, I knew that, but how would he respond to this? Khaled, are you saying— His voice trailed off, hesitant, unsure of how to proceed. Are you questioning the faith, the teachings of Islam, the path you've always followed? I nodded slowly, my chest tightening. Yes, I am. I've been reading, exploring other beliefs, trying to understand what is true, and I've found something I can't ignore. It's like a light has been shown to me, something beyond the life I've lived, something I've never been taught before. Ahmed's face softened, but I could see the hint of concern behind his eyes. He had always been faithful, loyal to the teachings of Islam, but his heart was gentle. He wouldn't judge me, I knew that, but how would he respond to this? Khaled, what have you found? I hesitated, but the words flowed before I could stop them. I found peace. Peace in something I never understood. I found Jesus. The moment I said those words, I could see the shock on Ahmed's face. His eyes widened, and he took a small step back, as if trying to process what I had just said. Jesus, he repeated, his voice barely a whisper. You're saying you found faith in Jesus Christ, in Christianity? I nodded, feeling the weight of my confession. Yes, I said softly. I've read the Gospel of John. I've seen what he taught, what he stood for: love, forgiveness, peace. It's different from what I've been taught. It's a truth that has awakened something in me. I can't ignore it, and I can't live a lie anymore. Ahmed stood up slowly, his expression a mix of concern and confusion. He had always been faithful, loyal to the teachings of Islam, and he didn't know how to react to this. But his concern for me, his love for me as a friend, was clear in his eyes. Khaled, he said gently, this is dangerous. You are a prince. You cannot just abandon everything, turn your back on the faith you were raised in. The consequences could be— I know, I interrupted, my voice shaking. I know the consequences, but I also know this is the truth, and I can't live with the weight of this anymore. Ahmed sighed deeply, his eyes full of sadness. I've always respected you, Khaled, but this— I could see the fear in his eyes. It wasn't fear for himself, it was fear for me, fear for what I had become and what I was choosing to become. But I also saw something else, something that would change everything. If you truly believe this is the truth, I will stand by you, Ahmed said quietly. But you must be prepared for what comes next. The road ahead will be dangerous, and you may lose everything. I nodded, feeling the weight of his words. I'm ready. I have to be.
The days following my conversation with Ahmed felt like a whirlwind, a storm that had begun within me and was now sweeping through every corner of my life. I could no longer ignore the path I had chosen, nor could I go back to the life I had once known. The decision to embrace a new faith had irrevocably changed everything. But the consequences were unfolding faster than I had anticipated. The palace felt like a pressure cooker. My father, who had always been a towering figure of strength and authority, began to notice the subtle shift in me. The royal duties that once felt like second nature to me now felt burdensome, suffocating. The pomp and ceremony that used to bring me pride now made me feel hollow, as if I were merely playing a role in a life that no longer fit me. My father, King Fahd, had always believed that duty was everything, that the kingdom's stability, its legacy, depended on loyalty, obedience, and tradition. He expected nothing less from me. But what would he say if he knew the truth? What would he say if he knew that his son, the future of the royal family, was considering abandoning the very faith that had been the foundation of our kingdom for centuries? I had always believed I was bound by duty. Duty to my family, duty to the people of Saudi Arabia, and duty to Islam. But now, I found myself questioning what duty truly meant. Was it about blind obedience, or was it about following the truth, no matter the cost? I tried to push these thoughts to the back of my mind, focusing on the events of the royal court, but they kept resurfacing, gnawing at me. I could no longer ignore the conflict between my heart and my duty. The two were on a collision course, and I knew it was only a matter of time before they would clash. It was the night of a royal banquet when I saw the storm gathering. The ballroom, decorated with gold and crystal, was filled with dignitaries from all over the world, foreign ambassadors, military leaders, and the highest officials of the kingdom. Music played softly in the background, and the clinking of glasses and the murmur of conversation filled the air, but I couldn't concentrate on any of it. My mind was elsewhere, and my heart was heavy. I was supposed to be the star of the evening. As the crown prince, it was my responsibility to welcome the guests, to speak on behalf of my family, to play my role with grace and poise. But tonight, I felt like a stranger in my own life. I smiled politely as I shook hands, exchanged pleasantries, but every conversation felt like a performance. I was merely going through the motions. As I made my way through the crowd, I caught sight of my father standing at the head of the room, holding court with a group of foreign dignitaries. His sharp features, his regal posture, his commanding presence, everything about him screamed authority. He was the king, and in this room, his word was law. But when our eyes met across the room, I saw something different in his gaze. It was a look I hadn't seen before, something that resembled concern, or perhaps even fear. I wasn't sure. The music faded into the background as I approached him, my heart pounding in my chest. I was ready to confront the storm that was brewing between us. "Father," I said, my voice steady, but my insides twisting with apprehension. He turned toward me, his face unreadable. "Khaled," he paused for a moment, as if studying me. "You've been distant lately. Is everything all right?" I nodded, but I could feel the lie on my tongue. How could I tell him the truth? How could I explain the turmoil inside me? How could I tell him that the very foundations of my life were crumbling, that I no longer knew where I belonged? "I'm fine, Father," I said, forcing a smile, "just thinking." But my father's gaze hardened. "Thinking? You've been doing a lot of thinking lately, Khaled. Too much, if you ask me." His tone was sharp now, his eyes narrowing. "You are the future of this kingdom. You have responsibilities, duties. Your mind must be clear." I swallowed hard, trying to suppress the rising panic inside me. He didn't understand. He couldn't. How could I explain that my mind had never been clearer, that my soul had never felt more alive, even though the world around me was falling apart? "I know my duties, Father," I said, the words feeling hollow in my mouth. "But I also have to find my own way. I can't keep living a life that doesn't feel true to me." He stepped closer, his voice dropping to a low, threatening tone. "Don't talk to me about what feels true. You have no idea what you're saying. You are a prince of this kingdom, Khaled. Your duty is to serve this family, to uphold our legacy. And if you think you can abandon that for some childish idealism, you are mistaken." His words hit me like a slap. The sting of his disappointment, his anger, cut deeper than I expected. I had always respected my father, but in that moment I realized how little he understood me, how little he understood the battle that raged inside my soul. "Father, please." But before I could say more, he turned away, his back rigid, his expression hardening. "Enough, we'll talk about this later." And with that, he walked off, leaving me standing in the middle of the ballroom, feeling more alone than I had ever felt in my life. The rest of the evening passed in a blur. I went through the motions, smiled when expected, spoke when expected, but inside I was unraveling. I had never felt more trapped, more disconnected from the life I had been given.
As the guests began to leave, I retreated to my chambers, my mind racing. How could I continue living this lie? How could I continue being a prince when my heart had already abandoned the throne? I lay on my bed, staring at the ceiling, the events of the night replaying in my mind. And then I remembered something. The vision, the garden, the peace, the love. It felt like a lifetime ago, but I knew it was real. I had felt the truth of it deep in my soul, and I knew I could never return to the life I had lived before. I had been given a second chance, a chance to live the truth, but I also knew the price I would pay for it.
The days following the royal banquet were filled with silence, a silence so deep it felt suffocating. I withdrew from the palace's daily activities, retreating into the confines of my private quarters. My father's words, sharp and cutting, echoed in my ears, but there was no escape from them. They lingered like a storm cloud, heavy and unyielding. But it wasn't just his anger that haunted me. It was the realization that the life I had known, the life of duty and expectation, was no longer mine to live. I spent long hours alone, wrestling with the growing tension inside me. Every prayer felt like a burden, a ritual I no longer understood. The royal duties I had once embraced with pride now felt like chains dragging me down. The lavish feasts, the endless meetings with foreign dignitaries, the ceremonial events, they all seemed hollow now, meaningless. I had seen a different truth, and it was impossible to ignore. The choice I had made to walk a different path, to follow a faith that was not the one I was born into, came with a heavy cost. The palace, once a symbol of power and prestige, now felt like a gilded cage. The walls closed in on me, suffocating me with their expectations, their demands. I had been raised to lead, to rule, to carry the weight of the royal family's legacy. But how could I do that when I no longer believed in the very foundation upon which my life had been built? As the days turned into weeks, I grew more restless. My relationship with my father became strained, marked by cold silences and terse conversations. He insisted that I resume my duties, that I prepare for my eventual role as the ruler of this kingdom. But every time he spoke, I could hear the underlying threat in his voice. He was losing patience with me, and I knew it. My mother, too, had begun to notice the change in me. Her gentle, loving nature was no longer enough to mask the concern that now clouded her eyes. One afternoon, as I sat in the palace gardens, trying to find some semblance of peace amidst the chaos swirling in my mind, my mother came to find me. She walked slowly, her footsteps soft on the marble, and sat beside me without a word. For a long time, we simply sat there in silence, watching the fountains dance in the warm afternoon light. The scent of jasmine filled the air, but it did little to calm the storm inside me. Finally, she spoke, her voice soft but full of concern. "Khaled," she began, her words gentle but firm, "I can see what's troubling you. I know you've been thinking, and I know you've been struggling, but you must understand that this family, this kingdom, it needs you. Your father, the people, they are all relying on you." I didn't turn to look at her, but I could hear the pleading in her voice. She was asking me to conform, to take my place in the life that had been set out for me. But I couldn't, not anymore. "I know, Mother," I replied quietly, my voice breaking. "But I can't keep living a life that isn't mine. I can't keep pretending to be something I'm not." She sighed deeply, her hand resting on my shoulder. "I understand, Khaled, I do. But you are not just living for yourself. You have a responsibility to this family, to this kingdom. Your father, he loves you, but he doesn't understand. He has always believed that duty is everything." "And so do I," I said, my voice trembling, "but not anymore. I've seen the truth, Mother, and I can't ignore it." She fell silent, her gaze distant, as if contemplating the gravity of my words. The wind blew softly through the garden, rustling the leaves of the trees, but I couldn't shake the feeling that my life, my future, was slipping away from me. "I don't know what to do," I admitted softly. "I don't know how to fix this, how to reconcile what I've learned with the life I was supposed to lead." Her voice was filled with sadness as she responded. "The life you were meant to lead, Khaled, was never yours alone. It was the life of this family, of this kingdom, and now you've chosen a different path. I can't ask you to turn back, but I can ask you to think carefully. There will be consequences to your choices. There always are." I nodded, the weight of her words settling heavily in my chest. I knew the consequences. I had known from the moment I made the decision to follow the truth. But I also knew that I could not live with the lie any longer. I couldn't pretend to be a man I wasn't, not even for the sake of duty. That night, I lay in my bed, staring at the ceiling, unable to sleep. My mind was a whirlwind of conflicting thoughts. What was the price of truth? Was I willing to lose everything? My family, my title, my position in the royal family for the sake of a belief I had only just discovered? Could I truly walk away from the life I had been born into, the life that was expected of me, in order to pursue something so intangible, so risky? I knew I couldn't go back. The decision had been made, and there was no turning back. But the fear of what was to come loomed over me like a dark cloud. What if I was wrong? What if this new path led to destruction, not peace? What if I lost everything, and in the end I was left with nothing but regret? The door to my chambers opened softly, and I turned to see Ahmed standing in the doorway. He had always known when something was wrong, even when I tried to hide it. His eyes were full of concern, but there was something else in them too, a quiet understanding. "Khaled," he said softly, stepping into the room, "I'm not sure what's going on inside your heart, but I know this: you are not alone. Whatever happens, I am with you." I looked at him, the weight of his words sinking deep into my chest. Ahmed, my loyal servant, had always been there for me, and now, in this moment, he was offering me something I didn't realize I needed: support, understanding, and loyalty that went beyond duty. "Thank you, Ahmed," I whispered, my voice breaking. "I don't know what's coming next, but I know I can't do this without you." He nodded, a small but reassuring smile tugging at his lips. "You won't have to do it alone. I'm here, Khaled, always." As the days passed, the storm inside me only grew. I spent my time in solitude, praying, reading, trying to find clarity in the confusion that surrounded me. But with each passing day, the truth I had discovered grew stronger, more undeniable. And then, one afternoon, I received a letter from my father. It was short, but the words inside were heavy. He had called for a private meeting. It was time to confront the issue head-on. It was time to make my decision. I spent my time in a haze, trying to focus on the royal duties that were still expected of me. But my mind was elsewhere, constantly torn between two worlds, the one I had been born into and the one I had chosen to embrace. Every glance from my father, every whispered conversation in the halls felt like a reminder that I was walking a path that could lead to my undoing. The palace, once a symbol of comfort and control, had become a prison, each ornate wall and intricate column a reminder of the life I could no longer live. I knew what was coming. I had received a letter from my father. It was brief, but its message was clear. "We must speak. Tonight. You will come to the royal chambers after the evening meal." There was no mistaking it. This was the moment of reckoning. My father had already sensed the shift in me. He knew something was wrong, something he couldn't control. The weight of that letter hung heavily over me, gnawing at my thoughts throughout the day. I had been avoiding this conversation, putting it off with small distractions, but now there was no avoiding it. I had to face him. That evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a warm orange glow over the palace grounds, I prepared myself. I tried to focus, to center myself, but the moment I stepped into the grand dining hall, I felt the familiar tension in the air. My father was already seated at the head of the table, his posture rigid and his gaze fixed ahead. He looked the part of a king, strong, unyielding, and distant, but I saw the flicker of something else in his eyes, something I had never seen before: fear. The room was quiet, save for the sound of footsteps echoing on the marble floor as I made my way to my seat. The other members of the royal family were present, my brothers, the advisors, the servants who had always been part of the scene. But today, none of them seemed to matter. The only thing that mattered was the conversation I was about to have with my father. I sat down, my hands trembling slightly as I placed them on the table. I could feel the heat of my father's gaze on me, sharp and questioning, like a sword poised above me. "Khaled," my father said, his voice steady but cold, "you have been avoiding me, avoiding your duty. I've tried to be patient, but I cannot wait any longer. What is this nonsense I hear about you abandoning our faith, about you turning away from the path of Islam?" The words hit me like a blow, and for a moment I was speechless. This was it, the confrontation I had feared. I had known it was coming, but nothing could have prepared me for the weight of his anger. "I haven't abandoned anything, Father," I said, my voice trembling but steady. "I have only been searching for the truth. I have found something deeper than what I was taught. I have found peace, something I have never known in this life." My father's face darkened, his jaw tightening. "You speak of peace, but do you understand what you're saying? This is not a matter of peace, Khaled. This is a matter of loyalty. Loyalty to our family, to our faith, and to the kingdom. You were born to lead, to carry the legacy of our ancestors. You cannot turn your back on everything that has made you who you are." I felt the walls closing in, suffocating me. The weight of his words pressed against my chest, but I refused to back down. I had already made my choice, and I would not let fear dictate my path. "I am not turning my back on anything," I said, firmly meeting his gaze. "But I can no longer live a life that is not my own. I cannot be the prince you want me to be. I have to be the man I am meant to be." There was a long silence as my father's eyes bored into me. The others at the table watched, waiting, but no one dared to speak. The tension in the room was palpable, thick with unspoken words and unresolved conflict. Finally, my father stood up, his movements slow and deliberate. His towering presence filled the room as he stepped around the table, coming to stand directly in front of me. His face was a mask of anger, but beneath it, I saw something else: disappointment. "You think you have found peace? You think abandoning everything will give you peace? You are wrong, Khaled. There is no peace in rebellion, Khaled. There is only chaos, and I will not let you destroy everything we have built." I stood up, meeting him eye to eye, refusing to show fear. "I am not rebelling, Father. I am seeking the truth. I have found it, and I cannot go back to the way things were." His eyes narrowed, his lips curling into a thin line. "You are a prince, Khaled. You have responsibilities. Your duty to this family is not a choice, it is a fact. Do not think for a moment that I will let you throw it all away for some fleeting belief. If you refuse to follow the path I have set for you, there will be consequences." I felt the weight of his words like a dagger in my chest. My heart raced, but I stood my ground. "I am prepared for the consequences, Father. I would rather face them than live a life of lies." He stared at me for a long moment, his expression unreadable. And then, without another word, he turned and left the room. The air felt heavy, and I could feel the eyes of my family on me. They were all waiting for me to back down, to apologize, to return to the fold. But I couldn't. The palace had become a prison of its own design. The gilded walls that once held the promise of power and grandeur now felt suffocating, trapping me in a life I no longer recognized as my own. My decision to walk away from the life my father had laid out for me, from the tradition I had been raised in, was now fully taking shape. I had crossed a line, and I knew there was no going back. The tension between my father and me had reached its breaking point. Every day was a quiet battle, a struggle to maintain my sense of self in the face of overwhelming pressure. But I could feel the storm approaching. The winds of change were whipping through the palace halls, and I knew my father's wrath was inevitable. I had defied him in a way that could not be undone, and I could feel the weight of his disappointment pressing down on me. It wasn't just his anger that worried me, it was the consequences of my actions, the far-reaching impact my defiance would have on the kingdom, on my family, and on myself. It was late one evening when the first real signs of trouble appeared. I had been spending more and more time in the quiet solitude of my chambers, trying to find peace in the midst of the chaos. The afterlife's vision, the calm of the garden, the presence of peace and love I had felt, it still lingered in my heart. I often returned to the words of Jesus, words that now seemed to hold more meaning than anything I had learned in my entire life. But I knew I couldn't remain in this state of internal conflict forever. The world outside was still the same, still caught up in politics, power struggles, and tradition. And as much as I tried to ignore it, the reality of the situation was inescapable. That night, as I sat reading the gospel, a soft knock echoed through my door. "Enter," I called, not expecting anyone. The door opened to reveal Ahmed, his expression grave. He stepped inside without his usual calm demeanor, his face tight with concern. "Khaled," he said softly, his voice low, "there's been word. Your father has called for a council. He's gathering the leaders of the royal family and the advisors. They've sent for you." I stood up, my pulse quickening. The urgency in his voice was clear. "What's it about?" I asked, my mind racing. Ahmed hesitated before speaking, his eyes lowering as though choosing his words carefully. "They know. About your faith, about what you've chosen." He paused, the weight of the revelation settling over both of us. "Your father is furious. He has already told the council that your actions are an act of rebellion. You must come with me now. It's time." The air felt thick as I followed Ahmed through the grand corridors of the palace. I had walked these halls 1,000 times before, but tonight they seemed unfamiliar. The soft glow of the lamps on the walls flickered as we made our way toward the royal chambers. Every step felt heavy, as though the palace itself were holding its breath in anticipation. When we arrived, I was led into a large, ornate hall where my father and the royal council were waiting. The room was filled with the most powerful men and women in the kingdom, military generals, diplomats, advisors, and religious leaders. They were all present, all waiting for me. I entered the room slowly, my heart racing, my mind a whirlwind of thoughts and emotions. As I stepped forward, my father rose from his throne, his eyes locked onto mine with a mixture of anger and hurt. The other members of the council remained silent, their eyes on me, waiting for the confrontation that was about to unfold. "Khaled," my father's voice boomed across the room, cold and unforgiving. "You have disgraced this family. You have defied everything we stand for, everything I have worked my entire life to build. You have chosen a path that is not only wrong, but dangerous. You are no longer the heir to this kingdom. You have forfeited your place in this family, in this world." His words cut through me like a knife, each one a blow to the heart. But I stood tall, my gaze steady. This was the moment I had feared, the moment I had known would come. But it was also the moment I had prepared for. I had no choice now but to face it head on. "Father, I have not disgraced you. I have not betrayed you. I am seeking the truth that is beyond power, beyond tradition. You may not understand it, but this is the path I must follow." The room fell silent, the weight of my words hanging in the air like a storm waiting to break. I could feel the eyes of the council on me, judging me, waiting for my father to respond. My father's face darkened, his expression of disbelief and rage. He stepped down from his throne and walked towards me, every movement filled with authority. When he reached me, he grabbed my arm roughly, pulling me closer. You are nothing without this family, Khaled, he spat, his voice rising with fury. You are nothing without this kingdom, and now you choose to throw it all away for some fleeting belief? You are no son of mine. I could feel the tension crackling in the air, the space between us charged with years of expectations, of love, and now betrayal. But I refused to back down. This wasn't about family or duty or title. It was about my soul, about finding the truth I had been seeking my entire life. I am a son of God, Father, not of this kingdom, not of the throne, not of a family bound by fear. I will always love you, but I cannot live in the shadows anymore. The council erupted into whispers, the room suddenly alive with disbelief and shock. But my father stood still, his grip tightening on my arm. For a long moment, there was only silence. Finally, he let go of me, his face hard, his eyes cold. Then you have made your choice. The words hung in the air like a death sentence. I knew this was coming. But hearing him say it, hearing him disown me, there was no preparation for that. The council members stood in stunned silence, but no one spoke. I turned and walked out of the room, my head held high. The doors closed behind me with a heavy finality. As I walked through the palace halls, the silence was deafening. I felt no relief, no triumph, only the deep ache of losing everything I had ever known. But I knew in that moment, as I stepped into the night air, that I was free, and no matter the price, I would never look back.
The silence of the palace echoed in my ears as I walked away from the chamber where my fate had been sealed. My body moved on autopilot, each step carrying me further from everything I had once known, everything I had once been. The weight of my father's words, his rejection, hung heavily around me, suffocating any hope I had left. But deep within, there was something else, something fierce, something that refused to die, no matter how much it was beaten down by tradition, duty, and pain. I left the royal wing of the palace and wandered into the quiet gardens, where the smell of jasmine and rosewater filled the air, soothing in its familiarity. The world around me seemed to carry on as usual. Guards stood at attention, servants moved silently between buildings, and the sound of the call to prayer reverberated softly in the distance. Yet to me, it felt like a dream, one that I had awakened from, but that still lingered, fading with each passing second. "Your Highness." I turned to see Ahmed approaching me. His face was drawn, his eyes filled with concern. He had always been loyal to me, but I could see the weight of my decision in his gaze. It was one thing to choose my own path, but to drag those who cared for me into the fallout was something I had never anticipated. "You heard?" I asked softly. Ahmed nodded, his expression unreadable. "I saw it all, the council, your father, the decision." His voice faltered slightly, as though searching for words that would make sense of it all. "Khaled, I am with you, but the consequences are not just yours to bear. You've given up everything, and now I fear for what's to come." I let out a heavy sigh and turned my gaze to the garden, the world beyond a blur. I didn't ask for this. I didn't ask to be torn between my family and my faith, but I can't live a lie anymore. I can't betray what I know to be true. "I understand," Ahmed said quietly, stepping closer, "but there are forces far greater than your father's wrath, forces that you do not yet fully understand. The price for your choices is high, and the path you walk now will be fraught with danger." I met his gaze, feeling the weight of his words. "I know," I whispered, "but I cannot go back, Ahmed. I can't pretend that everything is fine when my heart is screaming for something else." Ahmed's eyes softened. "Then we walk this road together. I will help you, Khaled, but you must know you will not be allowed to leave without being hunted. Your father has made his decision, and there are others who will not let you go quietly." His words rang in my ears like a drumbeat. The kingdom I had once called home, the people who had bowed before me, the advisors who had once respected me, would now see me as an enemy. My own family had cast me aside. There was no going back. The world I had known, with its power, wealth, and control, was slipping through my fingers like sand. "Where will we go?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "We will leave tonight," Ahmed replied. "I know a safe place. There are those who will protect you, but it's only a matter of time before the guards come looking for you." I nodded, my heart pounding in my chest. It was all happening so fast. My life, my future, my family, everything I had been raised to inherit was now lost. But I felt no regret, only a strange sense of clarity. I had chosen the truth, and though the road ahead was dark, I could not deny that it was the right path. As night fell, we prepared to leave. The grand palace that had once been my kingdom now felt like a distant memory, a place that no longer held any power over me. I gathered only what I could carry: clothes, a small bag of provisions, and the Gospel of John, the book that had set me on this path. The pages of the Gospel felt like a lifeline in my hands, a connection to something greater than the royal blood that ran through my veins. I slipped through the palace unnoticed, careful not to attract attention. The moonlight bathed the gardens in a silver glow, casting long shadows on the ground. My heart raced with every step, but I knew I could not stop. Not now, not when the price of truth had already been set. We moved quickly, silently, like shadows in the night. As we neared the edge of the palace grounds, I could feel the weight of the world pressing down on me. I was no longer the prince, no longer the heir to the throne. I was just a man, trying to survive, trying to find his way. As we reached the gates, Ahmed turned to me. "Are you ready?" he asked, his voice steady. I took a deep breath and nodded, though the fear in my chest was almost suffocating. Ready as I'll ever be. With that, we stepped into the darkness, leaving behind the only world I had ever known. I had no plan, no destination, only the certainty that I could no longer live in the shadow of my father's legacy. The kingdom I had been born into, the life I had been groomed for, was gone. But I was alive, and for the first time in my life, I was free. The journey ahead was uncertain, but in that moment I knew one thing for sure: I would not walk it alone.
The road ahead stretched endlessly before us, shrouded in darkness. As we ventured further from the palace, the sound of our footsteps seemed to echo louder in the quiet night, punctuated only by the occasional whisper of the wind. The silence around me was both deafening and comforting. Deafening because it reminded me of everything I was leaving behind, and comforting because it meant I was finally free from the chains that had once bound me. But with freedom came uncertainty, and that was a price I had to accept. We had been traveling for hours, moving through the narrow streets of Riyadh. The city that had once been my kingdom, the place where my name was known and respected, now felt foreign. The city's lights shimmered in the distance, a constant reminder of the life I had chosen to walk away from. My heart ached as I thought of the people I had left behind, my mother, my brothers, my father. But I knew I could not go back, not now, not when I had tasted the truth. Ahmed led the way, his pace steady and assured. He had lived through his own trials and knew the risks of what we were doing. He had told me many times that this journey would not be easy, and I was beginning to understand the depth of his warning. We were fugitives now, and I could feel the eyes of the kingdom already upon me, watching, waiting for me to slip up, to make a mistake. My father would not rest until he found me. "Khaled," Ahmed said, his voice low, breaking through my thoughts. "We need to move faster. We can't afford to linger here. There are eyes everywhere." I nodded, swallowing the fear that had begun to creep into my chest. "Where are we going?" I asked, my voice tinged with exhaustion and uncertainty. "Do you have a plan?" Ahmed hesitated for a moment before responding, his expression shadowed by the dim light of the streets. "I know a place, a safe house outside the city. It's far enough from Riyadh that no one will think to look for you there. But we'll have to be careful. We can't trust anyone." I looked at him, the weight of his words settling in my chest. "Do you trust the people there?" I asked, my voice filled with doubt. "I trust them as much as I can trust anyone in these times," Ahmed said, his voice tinged with caution. "They are good people, but they know what's at stake. They will help us, but we must be prepared for anything. It's not just your father's men who will be after us. There are others, those who would do anything to see you fall." My heart raced at the thought of being hunted, constantly looking over my shoulder, always fearful of what was to come. I had left everything behind, my title, my wealth, my family, but I had gained something greater in return. I had gained a sense of peace, a freedom I had never known, and I couldn't allow fear to take that away from me now. We continued walking, moving quickly but cautiously through the streets. As we neared the outskirts of the city, the lights of Riyadh began to fade into the distance, replaced by the vast expanse of the desert. The open landscape stretched before us, empty and silent, a stark contrast to the crowded streets of the city. Ahmed's pace quickened, and I followed closely behind, my mind racing. What was I running from? My father? My family? Or was I running towards something else? A purpose, a truth that had eluded me for so long? I didn't know the answer, but I knew that I could no longer live in the shadows of the man I had been. I had made my choice, and now I had to live with it. The small safe house Ahmed had mentioned was a modest structure, hidden from view and surrounded by the desolate desert landscape. The door creaked as Ahmed opened it, revealing a dimly lit room. Inside, there was a small fire burning in the hearth, casting flickering shadows on the walls. A few simple furnishings, a cot, a wooden table, a few chairs, lined the walls. It was nothing like the opulence of the palace, but in that moment, it felt like home. Ahmed gestured for me to sit, and I did, my body weary from the journey. The fire crackled softly in the silence, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I allowed myself to relax, to let the tension ease from my shoulders. "You're safe here, Khaled," Ahmed said, his voice softening. "You can rest, but remember, this is only temporary. We can't stay here long. We have to keep moving." I nodded, my eyes heavy with exhaustion. "I know." As I sat there, the flickering fire casting long shadows across the room, I couldn't help but feel a deep sense of loss. I had left behind the life I had been born into, the life of luxury, power, and control. But I had also left behind the chains that had held me prisoner for so long. The price of freedom was steep, but I was willing to pay it. I had come to the desert seeking peace, and in this moment, I found it. But I also knew that the road ahead would not be easy. I was no longer a prince, no longer the heir to the throne. I had no title, no position, no power. But I had something far more important, my soul and the freedom to choose my own path. As I sat by the fire, I thought of my family. My father, my brothers, my mother. They were all still trapped in the same system that had bound me. They were still living in the shadow of tradition, unable or unwilling to break free. I had made my choice, and now it was up to me to live with it. The fire crackled, and the wind howled outside. But in that moment, I felt something deep inside me, a calmness, a sense of peace that had been absent for so long. The storm was still raging, but I was no longer afraid.
The sun had not yet risen when I awoke. The desert was still wrapped in darkness, save for the faint glow on the horizon, the first light of dawn. I could hear the wind stirring the sand outside, a reminder that we were not alone in this world, that life was constantly moving, constantly changing. But as I sat up in the small room, I knew that the world I had known was behind me. The safe house had provided me with a temporary sanctuary, but now it was time to move on. Ahmed was already awake, preparing the small fire in the hearth, his movements swift and practiced. He had lived through many dark times, and he knew what it meant to survive. But this was different. This wasn't just about survival. This was about finding a new life, a new purpose, a new way to live. As I stood up and moved toward the window, I gazed out at the desert. The vast, endless expanse stretched before me, an overwhelming reminder of how small I was in the grand scheme of things. The winds swept across the sand, changing its shape with every gust. It was a world of uncertainty and danger, but also one of possibility. For the first time, I felt truly alive. I had given up everything, my royal title, my family, my place in the world, but I had gained something far more valuable in return: freedom. The freedom to live my truth, to follow the path I had chosen, no matter where it led. Ahmed's voice broke through my thoughts. "Khaled, it's time." I turned to face him. He had always been a steady presence, a constant in the chaos of my life, but now even he seemed different, more determined, more resolute. I could see the weight of the journey ahead in his eyes, but I could also see the trust he had in me. "Time for what?" I asked, though I knew the answer. "Time to move forward," Ahmed replied, his voice steady. "We can't stay here. We need to find a place where you can truly begin anew." I nodded, feeling the weight of his words. "Where do we go?" Ahmed's expression was unreadable as he grabbed his small satchel and moved toward the door. "There are people who can help us, people who understand what you're going through, but we must be careful. There are eyes everywhere." I knew exactly what he meant. The kingdom, though vast, was full of informants. The palace, the royal family, it was all built on power, control, and secrecy. And now I had become a target. My father's wrath would be swift, and I could feel the walls closing in even from miles away. We left the safe house before the sun had fully risen, the cold desert air biting at our skin. The wind had picked up again, blowing grains of sand across our path. We moved quickly, knowing that every moment counted. The road ahead was uncertain, but we had no choice. We had to keep moving. The desert stretched on, endless and barren, a stark contrast to the world I had left behind. I had once known luxury, opulence, and control, but none of it had brought me peace. The desert, with all its harshness and unforgiving nature, felt more like home than any palace ever had. There was freedom here, freedom in the stillness, in the solitude. As we traveled, I began to reflect on everything that had led me to this moment. The journey that had started with a simple question, "Is this all there is?" had now brought me to the edge of everything. I had questioned my faith, my family, my identity, and in doing so, I had found something I hadn't even known I was searching for: peace. A peace that came not from following the rules of tradition, but from embracing the truth of who I was. I thought about my father, about the pain in his eyes when he had disowned me. It had been a necessary part of the process, I knew that, but it didn't make the sting any less. He had been my pillar, my guide. To lose him, to lose my family, it felt like losing a part of myself. But deep down, I knew that I hadn't lost anything. I had gained everything. I had gained my soul. I had found a truth that was mine alone, a truth that no one could take away from me. The road was long, but Ahmed kept his pace steady. We had crossed into the outskirts of the city by now, and the sounds of life had started to fade behind us. The farther we went, the more the world seemed to open up. It wasn't just the desert that was endless, it was the possibilities that lay ahead. As the day wore on, we stopped briefly to rest, sitting on a rocky outcrop and looking out over the vast stretch of sand. The silence between us was comfortable, filled only by the wind and the occasional sound of a distant bird. Finally, I spoke. "Khaled, do you think I made the right choice?" He looked at me, his eyes full of understanding. "I think you're walking the path you were meant to walk. Whether that's the right path or not, only time will tell. But you're free now, Khaled, and that's more than most people ever find." His words settled into my chest like a warm embrace. I didn't know what the future held. I didn't know where this road would lead me, but I knew this: I had chosen truth, and in doing so, I had chosen to live fully. That was all I could ask for. As we continued our journey, the desert ahead seemed less intimidating, less foreign. With each step, I was learning to embrace the unknown. The road ahead might be dangerous, and the path would not be easy, but it was mine to walk. The wind picked up once again, but this time it felt like a friend, guiding me forward, reminding me that even in the harshest environments, peace could be found. It wasn't in wealth or power, not in the comforts of the palace or the control of the throne. It was here, in the desert, in the stillness, in the truth of who I had become. And for the first time in my life, I felt truly free.